everyone, it's Sonia from Blackstone Designs, and today I'm going to teach you how to make the Trinity Stitch. I'm using I Love This Cotton in the color Stonewash and an H 5mm hook for this tutorial. You'll need to have a beginning chain in a multiple of 2, but the stitch count will be an odd number. So for this tutorial, I'm going to chain 16, and that will give us a stitch count of 15. So if you've been following my tutorials, you know that I do not like to work in the front back loop of a chain. I like to flip it over and work in these back bumps. These little bumps right here. So we will start in the second chain from hook and we will put a single crochet. Now, if you did last month's stitch, which was the forked cluster stitch, you'll be familiar with how we're going to work this next stitch. Technically, this is a single crochet 3 together, but we are going to work this starting in the same space as this single crochet that we just made, and then over the next 2 unworked chains. So we're going to insert our hook and drop a loop in that same space that the single crochet is in. Then we will insert into the next back bump, drop a loop, and then in the next unworked, and drop a loop. We now have 4 loops on our hook, and we are going to drop a loop and pull it through all 4 loops. Then chain 1. To make the next Trinity stitch, we will then insert our hook into that same chain where the last Trinity stitch just ended, drop a loop, and then insert into the next unworked chain, drop a loop, and again in the next unworked chain and drop a loop. Again, we have 4 loops on our hook. Draw through all 4 of those and then chain 1. So do that across the entire beginning chain. Insert where this last Trinity ended, then in the next unworked, and then in the next unworked. And chain 1. Okay, now we have 2 unworked chains left. So this is where we're going to be placing the last Trinity stitch. So we do that chain 1 there, then insert our hook back where that last Trinity stitch ended, which is right here. And then in the next unworked chain, drop the loop. Next unworked chain, drop a loop. And then draw a loop through all 4 of those. Here though, we will not chain. Instead, we're just going to place a single crochet back into that last chain where that last Trinity stitch just ended. And then it looks like this in the first row. And for the second row, chain 1, single crochet into that first stitch, and then we will insert our hook back into that same space where we just made the single crochet, and drop our first loop, and then into the next single crochet, drop a loop, and then into that chain 1 space, drop a loop. We have the 4. We're going to draw through all 4, chain 1. And then all Trinity stitches are worked the same way. So we're going to insert back into the stitch where that last Trinity stitch ended. And then we're going to drop the loop, then into the next, drop a loop, and then into this next chain 1 space, drop a loop, pull through all 4, chain 1. Now the chain 1s are incredibly important, so do not forget those where they need to be placed, and also don't add them where they're not supposed to be. So when we start the row, we do a single crochet and go right into the Trinity stitch, then we chain 1, and at the end, we work our last Trinity stitch and we do not chain 1, we just place a single crochet. This helps offset how we're doing the single crochet 3 together because that's technically a decrease stitch. So then we have to make up for the stitches lost when we do a decrease. So how are we doing that? Well, when we come into this stitch where the last Trinity stitch ended, then we're not really doing anything, right? We're not losing a stitch because there's already something in its place. And then when we come here, that would be like technically just working its own stitch. But then when we come over to this third one and we include this into the decrease, now we're losing a stitch. So that's why we would need to do a chain one. And then we make up for that lost stitch. And then again, this Trinity stitch ended here. So if we start there, then nothing's really happening. We're not losing a stitch. This technically would be where we would start any new stitch in that next unworked space. So when we come in here and we add that to that single crochet 3 together, that's where we would then technically lose a stitch. So then we'll do that chain one. But when we get to the end, we don't have to do the chain one because we're also going to be adding a single crochet in that same space. So I'll show you that. This is our last Trinity. We're going to insert our hook back where that last one ended, then into the next unworked space, and then into that last unworked one. And then we complete the Trinity. We're not going to chain one. That would technically be making up for that lost stitch, but instead we're going to place the single crochet in there. And that makes up for the lost stitch. And that is what the end of row 2 looks like. So you will repeat row 2 until you have your desired length. And this is why it's important that we don't drop that chain one, that we make sure we always add a chain one, because if we don't, then we would then decrease, right? I'll show you without doing one. Now we've pulled them together and we've dropped a stitch in there. And so now our row count will be off, and any subsequent rows that we add will be missing a stitch, and we won't be able to form the Trinity stitches properly. So that chain one is always really important to make sure you get it in there. And that's the end of row 3. And I'm just going to work one more row here so I can really show you what's fun about this pattern. And now we're starting to form the actual stitch pattern. And you can see that it creates this fun flower-like effect in here. Looks like we have some petals or maybe like a starburst. But it also gives a ripple as you go along. So every 2 rows you'll have this raised ripple in here. It might be a little easier to see from the back side. Oh, actually, technically this is the front side. So we have our starting row, and then the second row, it creates the ripple. And then we have that third row, and then the fourth row is creating that ripple. And you can see the fun flowers still in there. So that's the Trinity stitch. I hope you learned something new today. I hope you love the stitch as much as I do. And keep a lookout for our complementary pattern that goes with this stitch that will be out shortly. Happy crocheting!